Hello, everybody, and welcome back to yet another empowering episode of Pep Talks with Megan De La Concha. I am your host, Megan. Welcome back. If this is your first time listening, yay! Give yourself a huge pat on the back because that is so amazing, and I'm so glad that you are here. I welcome you with open arms, a virtual hug. Hallelujah. If you are a longtime listener, which means listening over the past what is it, 6 or 7 months now? Thank you so, so much for your tried and true friendship and your loyalty to this podcast. That's what helps support this podcast. There are no subscriptions to it, obviously. There's no ads running except for the little one that you hear in the beginning. But other than that, your support means so much to me. So like it, share it, please subscribe. It really helps kind of just get me out there on different platforms. I pop up in different places. So I really appreciate the support and I really appreciate you taking the time to listen. So yeah, we are well into 2021, the first month, and there have been some, of course, some things that have happened along the way, basically politically. And so, yeah, we're off to a start. But you know what? We really are off to a favorable start. And that is what we're talking about today. And that's probably what we're going to be talking about for the next few weeks is favor. That is my word of the year. I know I mentioned this in last week's podcast or last week's episode, but my coach and mentor had challenged us to pick a word for this year that defines or will help defines where we are and our goals and our habits, where we are in alignment with our own selves. And mine is favor. So we're going to continue the conversation. And today we're going to talk about why favor feels funny. Okay. So last week we talked about falling back into the familiar, and you're going to hear kind of the same theme going on, but it is so important, you guys, that I hone in on this, not because this is just my personal journey that I'm real time experiencing, but also because it's something that we are all experiencing and something that we have been experiencing for a really long time. So the reason I'm choosing favor this year is because it is an unfamiliar word to me. Why is it unfamiliar? Not because God has been neglecting me and horrible things have happened over in my life, not because I've been struggling my entire life or I was just dealt a bad hand, but because I have been actively pushing away favor instead of accepting it. And that is unfamiliar to me, which I'm sure is unfamiliar to a lot of you. The whole definition of favor, it's just not a word in my vocabulary, right? And I don't know if that's just because it's just not how I speak, or if it's because I have been actively pushing away favor. And the action of choosing to accept God's favor has been very unfamiliar to me. And let me tell you, the past 3 months, I have been living a truly unfamiliar yet favorable life. So, favor is a new word for me in the sense that I have not ever focused on favor. I've always focused on the opposite, which is familiar or familiarity. And I tell you what, familiarity is the enemy of favor. And for years, I always chose what was familiar to me because it was predictable. I knew what feelings to expect, what emotions or anxieties came with the territory. I could control it because I knew the ins and outs of staying in familiar environments, staying in familiar job settings, staying in familiar relationships, in familiar mindsets in daily life, even if it was a struggle, even if it was a horrible environment that I was with full of fear and anxiety, I was still familiar with it. I knew how to navigate the waters, right? So an example of this, when I first realized, and I didn't realize this in the moment, but when I first realized that I was falling back into the familiar, that I was pushing out God's favor and I was choosing familiarity over that, is when I had, this was years ago, when I first left my abusive relationship that I had been in for 7 years and one kid later. And after that, I actively sought out, I went and I moved in with my parents and my 2-year-old son, and I stayed with them for about a year. And during that time, I chose to get therapy, which was the best decision of my life. I mean, I would not be the woman that I am today and been able to build my life up in the way that it has been built up if I had not sought out the therapy that I received. So I did therapy for quite a while, and I realized one day I was back at work because I was working from home at my parents' house, and so at this point I was back in St. Pete. I was working back in the office, and I distinctly remember sitting at my desk, and all of a sudden looking up, and it had to have been about the afternoon, and I looked up and I thought to myself, "Oh my gosh." I don't feel anxious, like a general feeling of anxiety, because that's how I lived my life day in and day out. I was always living in anxiety. And the only difference was whether it was elevated or whether it was not. I never felt normal. I mean, from sun up to sundown, no matter what it was I did, I was in a constant stressed state, a survival state. So I realized, and I remember so vividly freaking out that I wasn't anxious. Like, I couldn't trust that. This can't be real. What am I missing? What am I missing? What did let me check my bank account because I need to see how much money is in there or not in there. Like, why am I content with that? Why are all my bills paid on time? I'm not in a relationship right now. I actually feel good about being with my own self. I'm actually happy. That feels really weird to me. So what I did was I placed thoughts. I created thoughts. I created an environment in my mind to make me anxious. And it sounds, when I say it, and to those of you listening, it sounds crazy. Like, why would you put yourself through that? Well, why do we put ourselves through anything like that? Because it's familiar. All I knew was what anxiety felt like. I found a comfort in that. I settled for feeling that way. I didn't know what feeling normal felt like. And when feeling normal felt weird, I didn't like it. So I made myself to feel anxious because that was God's favor. God's favor was my healing in such a definitive way that I was literally releasing things in my body and my mind and connections that my mind and body had. And I was healing from anxiety. I was healing the things in my life. I was changing the things in my life that was causing anxiety. But that was so unfamiliar to me. So I pushed his favor out the door, out the way, and I went back to what I felt was familiar because I was comfortable in that space. And choosing favor feels funny because we don't know what it looks like. We can't see what lies ahead of us. When we're transforming and changing our lives, we don't know what feelings we're going to feel. Right? We don't know how we're going to feel about ourselves. We don't, if you have lived in a constant state of insecurity and self-esteem issues and just not feeling good enough and not feeling worthy enough, when you start to feel good enough and you feel worthy, we don't know what that feels like, right? We don't know what it's going to feel like to feel amazingly confident, right? I mean, we can imagine it's going to feel good, but it's also going to be scary. Because your familiar state is going to be to second guess yourself. Your familiar state is going to be to doubt yourself because that's what you're used to doing. Your familiar state is to not take that promotion, not go back to school. What if I fail? What if I'm not smart enough? All of those things are things that we have thought about ourselves. That's why we've never taken the leap of faith that we've wanted to take, because these thoughts and the way we speak and the way we act that hold us back in our familiar state, so that we don't find the favor within ourselves. We don't find the opportunities that God is giving us. We're pushing them aside to chase after or go back to what is familiar out of fear, out of frustration. We're constantly fighting against the favor, right? So we don't know what life is going to look like on the other side when we take that chance, when we take the change, when we start to transform. It's not predictable. We don't know what job we're going to have. You don't know what that promotion is going to look like. You don't know what type of money. You don't know where that's going to lead. It's scary. You're comfortable in your, in the call center at working your whatever, 10 to 7 or your 9 to 5 or your weekends. You don't want to work weekends. You don't want to work evenings, but you're comfortable with it, right? So we don't know what we're going to be doing in the future when we chase after our dreams, when we chase after the change and the transformation that we so crave. We don't know what we will be doing, and we don't know who we will be doing it with. And chances are it's not going to be with the same people that you're in right now, right? It's going to be with new, unfamiliar people. It's going to be in new, unfamiliar environments. Leveled up people, environments, people, relationships, faith, jobs. Your life is going to be aligned, but it's probably not going to be with most of the circle that you're running in right now. Because if it were, we wouldn't be here talking about this right now, right? So it's uncertain and it's uncomfortable because we cannot predict this new space or anything in it. And we are habits of control, and we are habits of wanting to know what the future holds, right? What's going to happen? What if? We are servants to the what if cycle. What if that happens? Well, what if that happens? I won't even go into that. That's a whole other conversation. But when we can't predict something, just like social media, it gives us access to everybody's lives. Facebook will tell you if somebody is live or not, if somebody is on their phone. So we know basically you can share your location, Snapchat, just on the phone, anywhere. You can see someone, you can on Instagram, I don't know if you can do this anymore, but you could look at what your friends are liking or not liking. What? First of all, why the hell do we need to know that shit? We don't. But we want to know it because it helps us predict what's coming. We want to be able to brace ourselves. We want to be able to know the unknown. Before cell phones, everybody always says this. Before cell phones, what did we do to get a hold of one another? Our loved ones went off to work and they returned home when they returned home. Wives, husbands, we went to stores, we went to movie theaters, we went out for girls' night, we went out to dinner, we'd be home when we got home, right? But now it's like panic attack when, your partner or your kid hasn't checked in with you, even though there's supposed to be a third freaking period. They haven't sent you a text. Sorry, did you get to school okay? We freak out about it because we've been given so much information. We've been given so much information to be able to know what's going on so that we're always up to date, so that somehow it makes us feel like we have any type of control or any type of predictability over our future. So when that's taken away from us, which it is taken away from you when you start to find favor in your purpose, in your journey, in new relationships, and just leveling up your damn self, all of that predictability is taken away, right? So it creates fear, and we find fear. We look for it. You will find what you are looking for. So when we don't, that's what keeps us back. When we don't know what lies ahead of us, we stay back in our smallness, right? The last 90 days has truly been uncomfortable and so unpredictable for me. But instead of having an expectation of what I think God is supposed to do and how he's supposed to do it, I am merely learning to accept the favor that he is presenting in my life. And just the other day, I'm telling you, things start to align in ways that it's just, you can't deny it anymore. Like, you cannot deny it. So I was listening to a sermon yesterday by the pastor of Elevation Church, very popular. I'm sure you all are familiar with him, Pastor Stephen Furtick, and he was actually doing a sermon on not focusing or stop focusing on negative emotions. And he touched on this exact subject, which is why I wanted to talk about it. But he touched on, favor, pushing away favor to accept what's familiar. And he asked the question, are you addicted to being miserable? Oh, child, took me out. Mm-hmm. My answer, yeah, I'm addicted. I was addicted to being miserable. I was absolutely addicted to being miserable. I was addicted to being miserable because miserable was comfortable. Bottom line, miserable was comfortable. It's what I knew. I knew how to feel in it. I knew how to predict it. I knew how to navigate through it, right? So when things were actually happening in my favor, it felt so weird and uneasy that I would start to create what I was familiar with: frustration, fear, anxiety, just like the story I told about when I first realized that I hadn't been anxious in days for probably the first time in my life, in my adult life. And that scared the crap out of me. It really scared the crap out of me. I have obviously accepted that, and now I feel 10 times amazing. But at the beginning, yeah, it was weird. It didn't feel great. It didn't feel like you would expect it to feel, because you have no idea how fast fear can grip you, especially when you've made it your natural habitat for so long, right? So we will find a way to have bad attitudes. We will find a way to sabotage or find fault with our favor, and we'll return to the familiar, just like I was doing. And yes, there is struggle with favor. That's just life, right? But here's the difference. There may be struggle with favor because it's unfamiliar, right? But eventually, guess what? You get familiar with that situation, with that new change situation. So the struggle with favor is just a season in your life. It's just a season. That's all that it is. It's just a period of time. That's it. But when you constantly choose familiarity and the struggle that comes with staying in your familiar state, that is a cycle, my friends. That type of struggle is a cycle. It is the struggle of always being broke, of always being unhappy, chasing after the wrong things, having the same relationships over and over again, the same mindset, the same doubts, the same self-esteems, the same low self-esteem, right? The same weaknesses. That's a cycle. When you make the decision to change and transform and to accept the favor in your life, you're going to struggle a little bit. That's natural, but it's not a cycle. You're not in a constant struggle state. You move forward, but it takes a little time to get off that wheel. If you've been running on a hamster wheel for so long, imagine what it feels like when you get off of it. Your legs are going to want it, like your legs aren't just going to stop. You're going to feel dizzy. Your heart's still going to be racing, right? Your blood's still going to be pounding, or, your heart pounding, your blood flowing through your veins. Your legs are still going to want to be running at that pace. So it takes a little bit to get your bearings. And it's uncomfortable and it's unfamiliar. And even though being on that hamster wheel was literally taking your breath away and it was awful and you couldn't stop sweating and you were running out of breath, you want to get back on that hamster wheel because it's what you're familiar with. You're not familiar with standing on solid ground and taking a deep, fresh breath of air. And yes, I said fresh breath, not a recycled breath of the same old crappy environment that you've been living in. A fresh, new breath of air, right? Favor has struggle because you have to do things differently. You have to think differently. You have to act different. You have to speak differently. Every single day for the past 90 days has been a struggle for me because I have been uncomfortable, because I am actively choosing something different. I am actively choosing my purpose. I am choosing to intentionally not go back to anything familiar. Anything. I am living out my purpose. I don't know. I'm sure so many of you, this is not something new that I am speaking on. I am probably behind the times, but I just got finished reading the book called The Alchemist by a Brazilian author, I hope I'm going to pronounce this correctly, but Paulo Coelho. And he in the book, it's about, personal discovery and journey, and it's really about a story. It's not like a self-help book. It's an actual story that is very entertaining and very insightful. But he calls your purpose the personal legend. And I love that. So I am living out my personal legend. And that requires me. That requires me to be uncomfortable, right? It requires me to get out of my comfort zone, to not settle. I have to make changes or decisions I've never made before. Yeah, I have to change in ways I've never thought I'd have to change. I have to make decisions I never thought that I'd have to make before. I have to take action in ways that I have never had to before, right? I have to think differently. I have to speak differently. I have to live differently. I don't know what the end of this journey looks like. And now I don't even want to say the end. I don't know what this journey looks like. I don't know what a month looks like from now. I don't know. I have no idea how I'm going to feel. I don't know the things that I'm going to come across. And I'm going to have to make decisions, or I'm going to have to make choices. I'm going to have to think about things differently. This is all very brand new for me, right? I know what it's like. I know what it's like to go have a 9-to-5 job. And this is not knocking anybody with a 9-to-5 job. This is my own personal journey. This is my personal experience. I know what it's like to go back to the job that I had, or the jobs that I could have, with my education, with my experience. I know what it's like to go to a 9-to-5. I know what it's like what to expect on a daily basis. I know what it's like to get up in the morning and get dressed for work. I know what it's like to get home from work and be tired and miserable because of the work that I'm doing, because it's not aligned with who I am. But what is it? It's a familiar paycheck. It's a familiar health insurance. It's familiar hours. I know what I'm doing day in and day out. I know the people I work with day in and day out. That's comfort. For me, that was settling. For me, that was choosing familiar because I was too afraid to accept God's favor. And when I finally did, I've been living uncomfortably for the last 90 days. And I'm not talking about family situations. I'm talking about internally, because I am having to learn things I've never had to learn before. I am having to create things. I have literally, in the past 3 months, right? I'm doing this. I'm doing a podcast. That is not familiar to me. That is unfamiliar, but I am doing it. I had to learn about the equipment. I had to learn about the platform. I had to learn about my message. I had to get clear about my message. I have to talk to you, my audience. I have to understand who you are and what it is that you want and how I can serve you. I've had to get light rings. I've had to, hire a podcast producer. My courses, I am a coach. I have clients. I have active clients. I am coaching women to empower their lives with confidence and resilience and transformation. It's unfamiliar. It's scary AF. Y'all, I am scared. I do it afraid, and I do it anyway, because it's the change that needs to happen, and I refuse to go back to what is familiar. Have I wanted to? Yes. Have I wanted to pick up my resume and send it out and just maybe go on LinkedIn, or maybe go on, I don't know, Indeed, and look at jobs because I know I can get paid. I can get paid something every 2 weeks. Yeah, of course. Have I had a defeated spirit? Absolutely. That's the type of struggle I'm talking about when you're choosing to live out your purpose, when you're choosing a different life, when you're choosing a different self. A better self, when I chose to get over my damn self to become my best self. This is the type of struggle. I have to learn different softwares. I have to learn how to do squeeze pages and opt-ins and create courses and I have so many subscriptions to so many things right now. It's like, it's insane. I have to learn how to use my money differently. I have to open new business bank accounts. I have to learn IRS lingo, right? Every single day of my life, the last 90 days, has been very uncomfortable. But I refuse to go back to the familiar because my uncomfort is because of God's favor. Do you hear me? My uncomfort, that's the wrong word. My discomfort comes from God's favor. I would have never known what this life was like had I not leveled up my faith and trusted God with my whole heart. With my whole heart. I don't know what it's like out there in the great unknown, but I also do not fear it because I have faith and I have favor. All of us know what our personal legend is, or maybe not clearly, but we feel deep within our spirit a pull to do something different. But sadly, a lot of us would rather stay comfortable with what is familiar. We find security in it. It's our safety net. We settle because it's predictable, because it's comfortable. It's just like when someone asks you, are you all settled in? It meaning, have you adjusted? And are you comfortable? Right? It doesn't mean safety. There is no safety in the unknown. There is no security except for God. And God has favor. You are in God's favor. I know that settling is not an option for me or my family anymore because I know that in order to see change, I have to create a vision for myself that I have never created before. I have to experience and see things that I have never experienced or seen before. Right? I have to trust differently. I have to walk in faith differently. I have to read my Bible differently because what is familiar is not trusting in God wholeheartedly. I would ask for things with seeds of doubt. I would ask God for things and I would still carry on my own way. I still found security and safety in my own understanding. I used to feel like I couldn't really unload my burdens on God. I couldn't really take the next step without knowing all the details. So I created frustration just so that I could feel something comfortable. And in the book of James, I'm just going to throw this in there. It says to ask in faith, but if you ask and you doubt, like behind the scenes, I doubt, like, hey, can I get this? But I'm probably not going to get it. You are just like a wave tossing in the sea, undecided, unstable, and to not expect anything from the Lord as to what you're asking to. Those are my own words, but I'm basically paraphrasing the book or a verse in the book of James, right? So when you're sitting there and you're asking God, I want this, I want this, I want this, but I'm probably never going to get it. It's probably just never going to happen. Okay, well then it's not going to happen. Boo. Sit there in your comfort, sit there in your security, and sit there in your safety. Because stepping out in this type of life, stepping out into your personal legend, stepping out into your purpose takes faith like none other. Let me tell you. And it's not just me. It's not just me that has to do things differently. It's my family. It's my husband for sure. Right? I have to have a different relationship with God. My husband has to have a different relationship with God because he's got to trust him and say, okay, God, she's not just crazy, right? Like this is something like you guys talked, right? Like, you know what she's doing, right, God? She told you about it or you told her about it. Like y'all good? Y'all on the same page? Okay, good. Because I just need to know so that I can like trust you. And like if I need to step in here and I need to like kind of like guide her a little bit back, you need to let me know. So he has to trust God differently. He has to trust me differently. He has to support me on a whole new level. He doesn't know. He's uncertain. He's uncomfortable, right? But he trusts and he has faith just like I do because that's just the type of man that he is. My point is, I don't know how I'm going to feel on this journey. I don't know what to expect. But I know that I will accept God's favor. I don't know what it's going to look like, sound like, taste like, smell like. I do know that no matter how this started, no matter what struggle comes, especially in the beginning, because everything brand new, but I will finish with favor. God will finish what he started, right? It is written. It is already done. So my emotional focus this year is on favor. Where is yours? Are you too familiar to receive the favor that is sitting right in front of you? Are you so used to rejection that you will find it when it's not even there? Are you so unfamiliar with acceptance that you can't even receive the love that he's sending to you? Sorry, I cut my thumb. For those of you watching, I cut my thumb on something out here and it really hurts. Anyway, another example of if you're so used to rejection, another example of finding familiar instead of God's favor. You know how you date a guy and the whole time you're dating the same guy over and over again and you're just like, man, I just wish I had a guy that texted me back. I wish I had a guy that was thoughtful, that actually took me out, a guy that was faithful, because you out here dating busted up boys, okay, who still live with their mama. So you're praying for all that, you're praying for all that. And then, you take some time to yourself, and then God brings along a man who does text you back, who calls you and says, be ready by 6, babe, because I'm taking you somewhere, and it's a nice somewhere. Or you go just have spontaneous fun. Someone who actually cares about you, who listens to you, who opens up to you, who you can open up to about your hopes and dreams and supports you, right? Someone who lifts you up and builds you up and wants to grow with you. But you're so unfamiliar with that you somehow find a way to sabotage that relationship so you can go back to dating your ex. Hmm? Hmm? Does that sound familiar to you? It probably does sound familiar to you because it's a place that you've been for a while. Those of you who still running around in those relationship circles, yes, I am talking to you. Does that sound familiar to you? Because it was so unfamiliar. You didn't know what to expect. It felt weird. Like, man, it's weird. He's being nice to me. It's such a weird, unfamiliar feeling to you that you created an environment of fear because it's what you're comfortable with. And you're starting fights and you're nitpicking, and now you're not trusting because you're so used to not trusting a relationship or yourself that you go back to what's familiar. You push away God's favor and go back to the familiar. And now you in the same cycle. Come on. Some of the places that God should be working on the most in your life, you are letting him do the least. That is a quote from Pastor Stephen Furtick. So is your emotional space or your emotional focus on what you're expecting God to do or accepting what God is doing? When we think we know how it's supposed to go and what it's supposed to look like, when we think we know what we're supposed to experience and feel, we think we know too much. So when we feel anything other than that, we create and run back into what is familiar out of our own fear. Right? When it's too good, we seek what's familiar. And I know I'm harping on this stuff. I know, but it's so true. I think we all need to take such a deep look as to what we're pushing away in our lives. It's right in front of us. Favor is literally right in front of us. It's not in that house you have. It's not in that car. It's not in that credit card. It's not in that Amazon cart. It is not in your friends. It's not in that relationship. It's not in that career. It's not in that degree. Favor is right in front of you because God has given it to you. And we need to be conscious of his favor. We need to cooperate with his favor and stop fighting against it. My God. No matter how it starts, it's going to finish with favor as long as you stay committed and working through the struggle of being uncomfortable and working through the unfamiliar and choosing favor instead of choosing fear. You have got to learn to let go of these certain attachments to familiar things that are in your life right now that are blocking God's favor. You have to go through and decide what's been living in your house that no longer favors the life you're building. Who is in your house? What's in your house? You've got to let go of that stuff. You have got to let go of these attachments. You've got to let go of the bungee cord, because it's going to, no matter where how far you jump out, you got all your gear on and you're ready. If that bungee cord is still attached, you're going to bounce right back to the familiar. You need to jump and you need to soar, and you will. And experience the journey. Experience every day that comes along the way, every hour. Have you ever noticed that every hour of sunlight is different than the next? Have you ever noticed how when the dawn is breaking, the skies are like the most like a painting that you've ever seen, with amazing these colors, these peach and pinks and blues and purples. And in the middle of the day, it's the brightest you've ever seen it. Bright blue skies against, white clouds. And then as it's setting, it creates like a golden hue. Ooh, that's my favorite. It's like cinnamon and honey and gold all rolled into one, shining through those blinds. And you just it's like that perfect amount of warmth. And then in the evening, it turns those amazing colors again. It's a royal blue, it's a navy blue, it's a dark purple, it's those cotton candy skies. Have you ever stopped and just looked at how the sun is every hour? Every hour is different. It's not what you would expect it to look like. It's different. It's unfamiliar. But that's God's favor in your life. So when you take the jump, don't have the focus on what the outcome is going to be. What am I going to feel? What is it going to look like? What am I going to do? Am I going to live here? Who am I taking with me? Who am I not taking with me? Enjoy the journey. Enjoy every hour. Enjoy everything you see, everything you learn. That's how I'm getting through it with God. But it has taught me the difference between a struggle and a cycle. It has taught me how to enjoy the favor that God brings into my life and my family's life every single day. Every single day. So what are you going to do? Are you going to accept his favor, or are you just going to continue to chase it away and go back to what's familiar? A lot of people will, and they will forever do that. Forever. Always knowing in their hearts that they did not go after their purpose, and they've settled. Are you going to accept what he is doing in this season of your life? I am concluding for the day. I hope that this touched somebody, blessed somebody. I know it blessed me. Talking to myself. Yep, bless myself. Here you go. Blessed. God blessed me with that sermon. I've listened to it 3 times. If you want to take a listen, it is Stop Focusing on Negative Emotions with Pastor Stephen Furtick. It's about 17 minutes long, super quick, super packed, like every sermon he is. I've listened to that 3 times. Love it. But that is the word of the year for me, is finding favor. I'm ready to immerse my entire life with being uncomfortable. Are you? Join me next Monday for another empowering episode of Pep Talks with Megan De La Concha. If you've made it this far, thank you. Please be sure to subscribe, leave a comment below. I engage with every single one of my listeners. DM me if you don't want to comment below. Subscribe on Apple, Spotify, Google. It really, really helps support. It really does. And I want this message to get out there, right? Not because I want people to believe in me, but I want people to believe in themselves. I don't want them to change for me. I don't need them to change. I want people to change for themselves, because I want everybody to be living their personal legend. I want everyone to be living in their purpose, and I want everyone to walk this earth with unstoppable confidence and unshakable resilience. It makes us better people. right? It makes the world a better place. If you're not yet, if you're new to me, check out megandelaconcha.com. If you're interested in my coaching services, book a discovery call. You can follow me on Instagram at Megan De La Concha. You can follow me on Facebook at Megan De La Concha or Pep with Megan. That's a page. Yeah, I hope you all have a wonderful day. Take this with you, meditate on it, take your time with it, educate yourself on it, find wisdom and understanding in it, read the Bible, drink your water. Have an amazing week.